Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Opinion Machine, the show where we talk about all things gaming. My name is Killjoy, and today we're going to be talking about Croc, The Legend of the Gobbos, Platinum Edition specifically, but the remaster of the PlayStation 1 classic Croc. And this is a hard video for me to make because this was a game that I did play when I was younger, but I truly played it playing this remaster recently. It was a game that I picked up over the Christmas period, something that I really wanted to play because I have a lot of nostalgia for these classic games, especially platformers. They are my jam. And I've played, I want to say, through the first couple of worlds. I believe I'm into the third world. I'm not sure how far I'm into it. And it's been a very eye-opening experience playing this game. Now, I don't want this video to be completely negative because I do think that there is a lot of charm and there's a lot of good there is having a game like this available to a lot of people. But unfortunately, it's just one of those things that clearly hasn't aged that well, even despite this being a remaster. So let's talk a bit about the game, what it is, and go into some of the individual elements of why I want to talk about these parts, and do I think ultimately if this is a good remaster of a classic game or not. So like I said, this is a classic 3D platformer from the time of the PS1, so we're talking back, you got Croc, you had Crash Bandicoot, you had Spyro, those sort of big mascot platformers from the time. There's other things like Gex, Mario 64. There's just a lot of 3D platformers from that time, from both the N64, the PlayStation 1, and all that. They were just a popular thing. And sometimes those games nailed how to play, and sometimes they didn't. Now, I believe that Croc was one of the first games out, especially in Europe, on the PlayStation, and that is shown off in the controls, because if you use the classic controls in this game, he does the tank controls, whereas they've added an analog stick in. But primarily what I want to highlight here is that as a classic 3D platformer, there's two things that I really appreciate about this game. Is one is the look of the game. They have given you the player the ability to switch between the original graphics and the up-resed, tighter, shinier graphics, and Croc has that vibe of an early 3D platformer, and I think that's really cool. I'm a big fan of it. I like games that have that look. There's something very nostalgic about it, and there's plenty of games like that will probably come out that are remasters that probably have that classic look, but they look better than obviously what they did at the time. And this game, with the new modern shiny paint, does look better than it would have done at the time, so that part's really charming. On top of that, you have the music. Now, I've never been a big, I've never known a lot of the music from Croc, so from my memory, I don't really remember it. Hearing the main theme, hearing a lot of the music in the game, it's got that very fantastical vibe to it, very fun vibe, very vibrant. And I will say that is something that really adds to a game like this, having that music feel very whimsical and charming. You don't get it in platformers so much anymore, not in the same way. If you look at Mario Odyssey, a lot of that music is very modernized, but in Croc, from the time that it was very happy vibes, very much this platforming vibes, and each area of the game you go to has a different bit of music. You've got different cave music, you've got different overworld music, things like that. I think it works pretty well, and it definitely gives this idea of hey, that this game came out in the early 90s, or whenever. I can't remember exactly when the PlayStation came out, but it was around that sort of time, probably 95, I want to say 96. I can't remember off the top of my head, but basically those early 3D platformer games, they are they have that feel and the music and stuff, and that really adds to that charming part of it. The controls are an important part, especially in this day and age, to any platforming game, or to any game really, but platformers of that generation, that original generation of time, they did not play that well. And so having a game like this that has two control methods, it has the classic control method that you will remember from the PlayStation 1, which is forward, backwards, Croc, and then when you push left and right, Croc will sidestep, and essentially, or turn, I think he might turn on the spot. It's tank controls, which was very, very popular at the time when you didn't have an analog stick to do sort of more of easier movements and things like that. You are relying on digital inputs, and so seeing the fact that they've given you both the opportunity to use both is really, really cool. But I will say having the analog stick there does modernize how Croc moves and how Croc handles, and I think that's really important. when trying to give this game to a new age of people, because ultimately using tank controls is you either like that or you don't. And I think having the ability to just have a standard kind of control stick that you would use on most platformers is good. However, as much as the controls do feel modernized, Croc himself feels weird to run around and play, and this might just be from my experience of playing other similar games, but I never truly feel like I'm in control of Croc. You're going to see in the video footage of me just like Croc, sometimes he just doesn't quite feel right, whether that's on ice, whether it's jumping off platforms, things like that. Like, for the most part, you kind of, when it's like easy platforming, he's not that bad. When it comes to tight platforming and particular jumps, I find this is where Croc kind of starts to fall down, even on this remaster, is that Croc's biggest issue is that I never feel like I'm in control of him fully, which means that I will do certain jumps that don't feel quite right. I won't quite feel like Croc's stopping on a dime, or he'll move around things weirdly. I don't think it's anything that could have been done. I mean, they might have been able to tighten up the gameplay, but I feel like this is just built, this remaster is just built on the original source code and things of Croc, so that's kind of difficult. But the things that come along with that problem is that Croc, in this game specifically, a lot of my jumps get eaten, where I move forward and jump, and the game doesn't like that. Not when you haven't, like, so you can't stand on the edge of a platform, tap forward and jump. It will not work. You will slide off the edge and die. And this game doesn't have coyote frames, which some classic platformers did, which is where you had a few frames where you could go off of a platform and still push the input for the jump and continue on your way. This game doesn't have that, which can lead to some very frustrating moments, especially with the way that this game is set up. That you will have multiple small platforms, and sometimes you will just trying to get into a rhythm, and instead the game will just eat your jump and you'll fall off. So that's not great. Along with those control issues, you can also find that Croc has a problem with slopes in this game. And this isn't necessarily a control problem, but you really notice it when you're trying to do some of that platforming, that sometimes you'll hit a slope and there's nothing you can do about it. Croc just goes straight down into the hole. Even running along and just like trying to take certain platforming things, there is a slight slope. Croc just hits it weirdly, and there's not really a lot you can do about it. So it's definitely a choice with the controls. I don't think they're as modernized as maybe they could have been. They definitely feel like they are more like a modern platformer, but the way that Croc is designed to run over certain terrains, the way that Croc is designed to play, you definitely notice that there's some things that aren't quite right. And that could be my experience of playing the game, but it could also be the fact that the game was even if it was intended to use analog controls, he feels like he's a little bit on roller skates and doesn't really stop, or it's just odd. It's very much a feel thing, and I think trying to nail that, it's not quite where it needs to be in this game. Now, one thing that I'm surprised the remaster doesn't do is give the option to players to remove lives, because this game is live based, as you'd expect of the time. Pretty much all platformers were, and because of that, and because of how difficult I find this game gets, and on top of that the controls get, and on top of that the level design gets, you definitely feel like you're in a point where there are some choices in this game that could have been modernized a little bit more. For example, giving the option to take the lives out, or the way that Croc gets hit in the game. He gets hit, he drops his gems, he gets hit, he dies again. Very much like Sonic the Hedgehog. In those games, you get hit, you drop your rings, you get hit again, you die. Croc plays the same here. In this game, I find that sometimes there's nothing you can do. So let's say you get hit by an enemy, or you hit some lava and bounce. Sometimes you just get stuffed. You do not have iframes the second time. It's not like you hit the lava, bounce, and then you've got like a little bit of time to jump off the lava. It's like, no, you're dead. And I think that's very old school in the way that works, because of the way that the game's set up. And I think that could have been toggleable. I think you could maybe have changed that as well and added that into the remaster and have the ability to remove lives and give yourself like extra hits and things. I don't want to hold it against the game, because this is more of a, that's how the game was designed. But playing it now, it feels frustrating when you're halfway through a level, you die, you run out of lives, hit continue, you're back at the beginning of the level. And, it's not something that needed to necessarily be that stressful or that difficult to deal with. I think a change in it. You can there are codes that you can put for the game, like cheats and things like that will allow you to add on infinite lives and things like that, which is fine. I'm all for it, because I do think this game will start to test your patience a little bit in the later levels, which does bring me on to level design. Now, I don't necessarily dislike the level design in this game. You can tell it was a PlayStation 1 game because you have an area, you go through a door, it loads the next area, you go through a door or a tunnel or whatever, and it loads the next area. So each level is very segmented into certain parts. My issue is with this game, I think, is that it starts off fairly enjoyable and fairly doable, but even by the third world, where it starts to get a bit more tricky and a little bit more puzzly and a bit more back and forth and stuff, some of the platforming is just very difficult, especially when you've got platforms that aren't that big. If they were a little bit bigger to compensate for the fact that Croc is quite a big hitbox, I think it would be alright, but this game kind of requires a level of precision platforming that I wasn't expecting. And I get it, you're trying to make the game more difficult. I'm not sure how many worlds there are, 4, 5, 6 maybe. But quite frankly, I like what they're going for in terms of the level design. I just don't always feel like they pull it off very well. There's one level in the desert world where you have to like go down some platforms to start with, which will break away and go through a door. And for some reason, it's just that bit was just a bit fiddly for that level. It was the way it was designed. At least I found it to be quite fiddly anyway. And it's just, I like the first world. I think the first world's pretty good. I quite like the second world, but the third world just seems to have ramped up on a level of difficulty that it mainly feels like there's a lot more slopes. The platforming, if you mess it up, is pretty much game over. A lot of the platforms are quite small. The game just feels like it becomes a lot more difficult by just having a lot less there, or putting a lot more of these smaller platforms in there instead of like some of the bigger ones you can stand on. Like the enemy placement and stuff has never really bothered me. The enemies themselves aren't that much of an issue to deal with. If anything, the hardest thing about this game is like platforming over like moving platforms, platforming over lava, platforming over bottomless pits. That's where the real challenge comes in from, especially if you're trying to get all the gems or you're trying to collect all of the gobbos and things. And it will try your patience because it's a slower platformer. Like, at least it feels like a slower platformer, but it doesn't help that the level design in some areas can just be a little bit fiddly. And again, it's of its time, but it's a shame that there isn't anything there to like help improve some of those things. I don't know how you would necessarily change that if you don't want to change the original game, but it definitely feels like a game from that time period, and I imagine they probably did make it quite difficult, or feels like it's quite difficult because, you know, at the time you buy the game, they want you to spend as much time playing it. I think compared to other games that are more linear like this, like Spyro, or even something like Crash Bandicoot, like, I'm not even the biggest fan of Spyro, but I think that does it a bit better from what I've played. And even with Crash Bandicoot, where the levels are very linear, like Croc is a very linear game, like Crash just does it in a better way, I think. I think the problem with Croc is that some of the level segments just do not feel, they feel very, I think feels very much put together and slapdash. It doesn't feel very coherent, which is probably a bit harsh to say, because I do like Argonaut as a developer, but it's just one of those things where I'm just like, I'm not sure about how this is come together. So let's answer the question then, does this remaster actually, you know, is it a remaster that's good? I'm inclined to say it doesn't quite go far enough. I think for a remaster, yes, there's content here. There's loads of like interviews and archive footage and extra music and all this sort of stuff. A Crocopedia is there. There's achievements. There's a ton of things in this game they've added. They've given you the fact that you can change the graphics on the fly. They've given you those analog controls. This is not a bad attempt from Argonaut, who have only recently restarted, and I don't want to bash on them because they did make one of my favourite games, being Red Dog Superior Firepower, but I can definitely say that Croc Remaster could have done with a little bit extra sauce in terms of just maybe some toggles, maybe some options for difficulty in terms of, hey, turn the lives off, don't make that, doesn't have to be a cheat code or whatever, because the issue with that is then you now have to, if you want to do the achievements, you have to play through pretty much the entire game properly, which I've noticed that I've used those infinite life cheats and it's disabled my achievements completely. But like, it's almost there. It's almost very, very good. I think the fact that you have issues with the slopes, issues with lives, camera could be better, how Croc feels to run around with those controls, like these things, if they were to get like patched and tweaked a little bit, I think this would be a lot better. Like, I think the camera should be able to come further away from Croc a bit more, so you've got a bit more angle, a bit more depth, so you can see what you're doing. That would really help. In terms of like the lives and the hit counter, that's just what it is. Those things could just be toggled. The slopes, I just don't think you can fix, for the simple reason is that that's part of it. It's based on the original game, right? And yeah, that's kind of how I'm feeling about it, because I'm like, I like it. I find the game very charming. Please don't get the idea that I'm like, oh my god, this game's like the worst thing ever. It isn't. The problem is, in this day and age, it feels more like an average game rather than like a good game, based on the fact that we are at a point now where we've got those modernizations of a lot of these games, and I feel like if you're going to remaster a classic, you kind of have to iron out some of those things, and making the graphics look nicer and adding in modernized controls is a start, but I wouldn't say that's going far enough for a remaster. I think the fact that my jumps get eaten quite regularly, I think the fact that the slopes in this game feel like as soon as you hit it, you lose control. There's some little tweaks there that I think would put this game like so much better at that point, just because I do like it, and I want to like it, and I want to get through the game. It feels like it's testing my patience sometimes with some of the way the level's designed. The level design's obviously not going to change, but there are things around that you could alleviate some of that frustration, I think, with it. I never played Croc 2. I hope that Argonaut will get to put that out. I would love to play that and see how that is. Yeah, I just one of those things with this game where it's like, it's a remaster, and I wish it would just go a little bit further than what it is, just because I think it's almost so good as a content complete product. You know, having all of the extra stuff in it is phenomenal, but as a game to play, it definitely starts to lose its charm by the third world, and I'm like, oh, do I want to continue playing this? Like, part of me does. I would like to get through it, be that with the infinite lives on or not, but like, it's just one of those things where it's like, oh, this game could have been a really nice modern version of the classic Croc, but I don't think it quite hits the place where it needs to be for people to enjoy it. So that's going to do it for me today then, guys. Thank you so much for watching, as always. If you liked the video, hit like. If you want to see more content, then obviously hit subscribe. Please feel free, if you are somebody who loves Croc or you love this remaster, please put your comments down below, because I'm curious if people that did like Croc still feel the same way about it now, or if they agree with some of the points I'm bringing up, or disagree. But always welcome, always happy to hear what people have to say on classic games like this that have a lot of nostalgia. Anyway, until next video, I will see you then.